All right. So Dr. John with the Voyage Clinic podcast today. Thank you so much, Craig LaMont, for being a guest today.
You're welcome.
Really excited about our conversation today. Our objective, our mission with the Voyage Clinic podcast is really to just promote learning and education and understanding. I'm a family physician and I just love learning and growing. And so I learn as much from our guests as my clients do probably.
Yeah.
And so, we're just promoting health and wellness, helping people enjoy their life's journey and just move forward their ships in whatever capacity they are in and just move.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great.
Take a little moment to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you come from and who's this guy.
All right. So my name is Craig, right? And I am a marriage and family therapist. So also dealing with families. My profession is probably more tuned in and fine-tuned into the business side of running companies that do therapy or therapy-related cool stuff. So I have kind of a knack of starting and creating. I love to create and build. So I have a lot of business experience, and trying to run multiple businesses all at once is kind of my MO. But then, I have this whole other piece. I probably spend as much time, sometimes more, in volunteer work too. So I work with kids in the community, have done this is my 39th year of coaching kids youth sports. And I've coached, I don't know, probably over 10, close to a dozen different sports, even sports that I didn't compete in. Because I think if you know kids and you understand fundamentals, you can pretty much, at least at an entry level, you can coach anything. But it's been a real blessing for me to work that way. I have a family. I love family. I love faith. I love being involved in the community and like building stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. I just get really passionate about things, and then maybe naively try to jump in and do stuff. And I just maybe too much of an optimist, but I have a hard time seeing failures or seeing roadblocks. I just like to get things done.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool.
So that's me. That's
you are one of the most I don't know, famous wrestling coaches probably in our area. You've coached my son, we're in the same community.
Yeah.
And I love the grit. I love the things that you bring to these young men and to these young ladies and in teaching and learning and growth. And how's that transferred over, like the marriage and family therapy piece and the coaching piece? Like, are there commonalities there that you see in
for sure
people?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I think there's commonalities with everything. So let me just say that, working on a farm, working on a job, working on anything, being a great musician, being a great, artist in any capacity, being a great athlete in any capacity, you can learn the things that wrestling teaches, right? So I coached soccer for 22 years. I love the game. I love football. I don't know why. I mean, with all of what I know about brain science, I wonder sometimes what I could accomplish if I didn't play that sport with my own brain, right? But I love and enjoy, there are a lot of sports and athletics and physical fitness things that are fun, but even the grueling sports like gymnastics, there's something unique about wrestling that is, I think, more therapeutic or more generalized to everyone who does it. Meaning, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I'm an Olympic swimmer and I'm committed and I have a great support system, I'm going to work every bit as hard as if I were an Olympic wrestler, right? If I'm a weightlifter, if I'm a gymnast, like any sport on the elite level, those athletes are really serious. They have to understand sacrifice and pain. But you can walk into a fourth grade wrestling class or a seventh grade wrestling team and you don't have to be an elite athlete to get, like, it's just different. Number one, it's usually not fun unless you're really good at it. And then there's always somebody better and tougher than you, no matter what. And so when you join wrestling, like, it's so, from a clinical perspective, it's like the perfect grit grind, right? It's like the perfect teacher of all of what life is about. And there are very few sports that I've been able to figure out that where you can get that on a mass level for like everyone who does it, right? And where the culture is such that that's what's expected. And whereas in most sports, again, no disrespect to the elite athletes, because I've participated in so many of those sports, I can say pretty much with confidence that none of them defined my character. I remember when my father was asking me, like, because I played high school basketball and wrestled my first season, my freshman year. And my dad was big into like public image stuff, right? And he's like, well, what are you going to do? Because the coaches both said you have to choose next year, right? And he says, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, what do you mean what I'm going to do? That's a silly question. Like, I thought that he knew me. I'm like, for sure I'm going to wrestle. And he's like, well, why? Because more people go to basketball, which in my high school turned out not to be true, by the way, because our wrestling team was pretty good.
Yeah.
And
what was that?
Up in Cache Valley. Wrestling's like a big tradition up there, and sell out crowds and stuff, but it's fun. But nonetheless, like, to me, it was shocking that, as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid, that my dad would even have that question about what I wanted. So when he asked me why, I just said, well, because like wrestling, like, defines my life. It's like everything that's important to me is wrapped up in the struggles in that room, right? And the torture that goes on in that room. And then in college, same thing. He's like, well, are you going to take your football scholarships, which I had more of, or your wrestling scholarships? And I'm like, that's a dumb question. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I literally said that. That's a dumb question. You should know me better than that. And so for me, yes, the coaching of the wrestling in particular, but really, in the world of therapy and the world of real life, like the toughness and the grittiness of real life, like, it all melds together. It's almost hard for me to see it any differently. And in particular, like, my philosophy of what therapy should be. A lot of people have this concept that, therapy should be this nice, feel good. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm going to go to this nice therapist who's going to make me feel good about myself. And like, I think good therapists, like, they let people suffer and they encourage, like, the hard stuff. And therapy should be kind of like physical therapy after knee surgery, right? It should be painful and not something to coddle. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
I love it. What I'm hearing is that you're passionate about progress.
Yeah.
And that there is a grind and a certain amount of pain and suffering that comes with any progression, whether we're trying to grow a muscle group. I just had a podcast last week with Steve Pincock. He was like one of the head trainers at BYU, working with all the powerlifting teams and football teams and helping them, get gains. And we nerded out about exercise and how, increasing to that pain, when it burns, pushing, people say push to failure, push to the pain, and how that really creates that growth. And it's funny listening to your story, even as a kid, like, you became passionate about that. Dad, duh.
Yeah.
Wrestling hurts more.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
That's right. That's right.
Basketball, like, there's some pain there, but like wrestling is where the real growth is.
That's right.
And that's really cool. I love that you brought up the therapy piece and how, therapy's hard. I'm a family doc. I do a lot of mental health. A ton of
you have to.
And I do not do therapy well. I don't do it at all. I'm not a therapist. And so I refer to these therapists to, people to get help. and it's a mixed bag.
Yes,
I get
it is.
back, right? So sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's worse, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's bad, and so that's really hard for me to just navigate. Like, where do I send these people to get the talking help? Someone who's not coddling, but who's empathetic, but not sympathetic, and how to that balance. It's just interesting, and it reminds me of being a good parent, actually. Like as a good parent, I'm like,
it's the same.
The kid asks for ice cream for breakfast. I'm like, no, you're not. In fact, go mow the lawn and do 10 push-ups.
That's right.
And we'll talk about breakfast.
Right. Right.
And so I think there's some balance in our lives of pain and suffering and progression. And if I had to name this podcast, maybe that's what I would name.
Right. I mean, so just think about everything in life that has value. Mm-hmm. The things that people cherish the most, right? College degrees, or the stories that people tell that define themselves. Without fail, right? It comes with sacrifice. It comes with some kind of pain or some kind of effort. And so I would think that take the kids who aren't athletes. Let's say that you have a passion for old cars, right? Well, if you have a passion for old cars and somebody gives you an old car and then pays you to fix it up and then pays for the insurance on it and then buys the new tires on it, and like that kid, let's say he's a 16-year-old future mechanic, future car racing guru. Is he going to value that car more or less than if he has to work for that car? If he has to grind it out by hand instead of using all this fancy power tools, if he has to pay for his own tires, how's he going to drive it? How's he going to treat it, right? And what significance is it going to mean for his own identity? Anything in life that has value has pain, right? And raising kids, marriage, getting a good job, getting a good education, making a sports team, right? Finishing a marathon, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It's like things of value have pain. And I think what is sad about our current culture is that we have finally, I think, turned a corner. Finally, I say that as if it's an optimistic thing. Mm-hmm. We've turned a corner to where you can read like the blog sites and the comment sections on the news, whatever they call that, message boards. You can look at media. You can read the stories or watch movies. But our whole society has come to a shift to believe that it should be the law, that it's moral obligation, that it's religious obligation, that it's educational obligation for school like that our jobs as adults is to keep kids from being hurt. Right. And the problem is that I think 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was seeping in. But now, literally, if you ask a young mother who's 25 years old and has a 4-year-old, like they literally feel like this is my number one role, is to keep my kid safe and away from pain. Mm. And if something goes wrong, like our legal system now, like you can't even let your kid go out of the yard. You can't let him play alone. You can't let him walk to school anymore. Because if you do and something happens to them, you can be put in jail as a negligent parent or whatever. Like our whole culture has changed. There's a great book called The Comfort Crisis, right? Mm. Like our whole society is in this crisis to where the cell phones have to be updated. Like we need things faster and easier, and the easier they are and the more comfortable they are and the faster they are and the less we have to do physical or mental or emotional work to get it, then the better. That's what's driving our entire economy right now and our worldviews. And man, it's just killing people. Like you're talking about grit. Where do you learn it? That's another reason why I love youth sports, right? Particularly wrestling, because when you strike out in baseball and t-ball, like it's not devastating, right? You're not shunned by your peers, but when you get physically beat up as a 7-year-old in wrestling, like you have to learn how to face all those fears, right? It's just a different level. It's a different level of teaching grit. And it's a different level for parents to watch that happen, to watch because in virtually almost every other sport, like more of the Olympic sports are a little bit better of teaching grit to parents because they can't blame teams, but we're really a team focused. We love football, basketball, baseball, right? This is soccer, like all the team sports where you can blame coaches and blame other teammates. And you can't really do that in swimming. You can't do it in track. Can't do it in wrestling. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's on you.
It's pretty much on the athlete. And so when you fail, when you get hurt, when you get injured in wrestling, when you get beat up, parents have a hard time rescuing you. And so it teaches parents grit too, which is cool.
I wonder if I think there are many alarming things in our society right now that are creating this coddling, right, of the next generation. And I joke with my family a little bit about like the pansification of America. Right? Like we're just becoming a bunch of pansies. And how do we reinstitute some degree of grit and some degree of suffering, and be okay with that as parents, to watch your son or daughter flounder and maybe not eat a few meals.
Right.
Like my daughter's in college and she's like, "Hey, Dad, you think you could lend me some cash? I'm a little bit low, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, that's an instant gratification thing that will help you not suffer. And I love you, honey, but guess what? You get to not have a cheeseburger tonight, and that's okay. And I mean, that's such a wimpy example, right?
But it's real.
Yeah. And so how do parents get comfortable? How do they make that mind shift of, I'm not trying to abuse my child, right?
Right.
But it's okay if they skip a meal. Or I don't, maybe that's a bad example, but I'm not trying to abuse my child, but it's okay if they don't wear the nicest whatever, or
it's okay that they don't have a cell phone when they're 14, or it's okay that they don't have social media when they're 15, or it's okay that they can try out for a soccer team and realize that they may not make it for whatever reason. Maybe the coach doesn't like it. Maybe they're not in the right club. Maybe they're not in the right, maybe they're just no good. Maybe they, who knows why? It doesn't matter why. What matters is that when it comes to the day where they post the cuts, right? And they choose the team and your name's not on the team and you have to stand there in front of your peers and all the girls that don't make the team cry. Like, a lot of parents would rather their kid just not try. They would just, right? Because they aren't comfortable with pain. Right? They're not comfortable with emotional discomfort, even more so social, right? If my child gets rejected socially, what does that mean about me as a parent? What does that mean about my child? And do I know how to cope with that? And can I help? And is it okay? Right? Maybe even if I'm okay with physical injury, but I'm not okay with social injury. And then what are our belief systems around that? And so I really think the only answer, the best answer, is that you have to learn to believe it, right? That you have, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh yeah, that makes cognitive sense. Oh, I'm going to try to do better. But if you really don't believe it, if really deep down, you don't believe that it's in your child's best interest to experience hard things and to survive them and to learn the skills about learning how to survive them, then it's going to be hard for you. And if you don't believe it, the best way to not believe it is not so much to look at your child, but to look at yourself, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what are the patterns in your life where you avoid pain and avoid hard things and seek comfort at every corner? Right? So how is it in your life that you are, constantly trying to say, I hate this part about my life, so I'm going to get rid of it, even if it's a healthy thing, right?
So we're largely in a technologically advanced time. We were given a lot of things, from transportation to food to our needs, water. I mean,
everything.
My father used to haul his water from the creek to his home. That's just one generation ago.
Right.
Granted, he's an older guy and stuff, and he kind of grew up really rural, but
I get it.
I had to, I farmed a lot of my stuff. We had a well, we drilled a well in my property in rural Nevada, and we had animals. We milked goats every morning super early. We did all the animals things. We butchered our own meat, and we hunted, and we did a lot of hard things.
Right.
And we went and we kind of like earned those things. We gritted through it. It's not easy, and packing out an elk or packing out a deer. Those are beautiful opportunities for growth. I don't know the equation. It's foreign to me. The city life thing.
Yeah.
Raising kids and like, whoa, they got everything at their hands. Like what?
Right.
I don't know. Are there things that obviously sports, I think, are one of the keys to developing the grit and the resilience. Are there things that we as adults can do to kind of embrace that grit and develop that grit in ourselves so that we can be the sturdy, kind of gritty parent that we need to be to our parents? To our children.
I think, again, it's like, what am I doing, right? Especially if I have money, what am I doing in my personal life that is challenging, that I could possibly fail at, right? Or that creates physical, emotional, or mental stress and pain, right? So if I don't have those things, if I don't have something like that, then I should probably choose something like that, because the neuroscience of the brain actually requires it to reach your optimal health. You should do those things, right? And it's as simple as maybe an exercise plan, or maybe a diet plan, or maybe to go out and risk something, right? Or to actually build something, or to learn a new skill, or whatever, right? Like, my father passed away about 2 months ago, and I remember being with him in his very last doctor's appointment. They had pretty much said, look, cancer's going to get you this time. That your quality of life depends on one thing and one thing only. It has nothing to do with any more treatments, because we can't give you more treatments. It has nothing to do with where you're living or who's caring for you or whatever. It has to do with one thing. And my dad was just like, what? Because he was desperate. He'd been fighting it for years, and he was desperate for every day. He's like, you have got to force yourself to learn something new mentally. You've got to do something with your brain, because your brain is the most important part of your body being healthy. It's not just the body. It's not going to physical therapy. You've got to do something with your brain. Mm-hmm. And I looked at my dad. This was about 6 weeks before he died. And I'm like, Dad, you watch TV. You sit in that chair because you can't really move anymore. You can't walk anymore on your own. You sit in that chair and you watch TV all day in a dark room, right? All day, all night. You're either on your cell phone, you're on Facebook, or you're in that chair watching old cowboy movies. I'm like, learn a language. He's like, well, I've tried this. I've tried it. And he's in the doctor's office with me, poo-pooing all of my ideas. And, like, maybe it would have extended his life a day, or maybe an hour, or maybe not at all. But the point is, whether I'm 82, 92, or 18, or 9, I should be challenging myself to the point of pain, frustration, exhaustion, like on a daily basis. And if I don't, then the endorphins in my brain, they aren't releasing the right hormones to make me as good as I can be. They're not, right? I can't be healthy without pain. I can't be gritty without pain, right? So the easier my life gets, the more likely I am to get unhealthy, right?
Yeah. I just did a podcast today, actually with Orient Health, and we talked about the art of medicine. We talked about right brain, left brain balance, and we talked about neuroplasticity and the importance of developing neuroplasticity throughout our lives.
Your whole life.
And the way to get there is do exactly what you're talking about, which is do something hard, do something new, take dance lessons, do these,
Yeah.
learn a language.
Yeah, play the harmonica, do something.
Yeah,
do something.
Pickleball, that's my jam. I love it. I think this is super, super clutch. And I love the translation of find a hard thing, work toward it, do it, grind it, and then just kind of sit in that satisfaction if I accomplished something hard. My wife signs up for these Ragnar races and these these Ironmans and these things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, honey, what are you doing? Like, my suffering is different than her. She likes to suffer in different ways. And I think it's exactly for that purpose, because she gets a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment out of that. And that's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Well, that's her narrative is cool because it's healthy that she has the narrative satisfied. I'm accomplished. I can do hard things. I can stretch my limits. But on a daily basis, the biology and the neurology of the brain and the body, like, even if that's not part of her narrative, like, just think, just think of how healthy she is as a human being because of that on a day-to-day basis. Like, what's going on inside the little tiny cells and neurons. And
yeah, I'll tell you, I talk a lot to my adolescent clients and my families a lot about some of the pitfalls of our current society toward developing grit. And one of them is a pseudo productivity, where you feel like you accomplished something, but it was online in a video game. Yeah. You beat this dungeon, you did this thing, and you opened a chest and you did this really cool thing. And you get like a little pseudo sense of,
oh yeah, you hit your little feedback loop of dopamine hit, right?
Exactly. So those things, I don't know if there's any redeeming value to any of the technological investments. The Amish were completely right. Like, we have got it wrong right now. We got to rework this thing. But I always talk to them about having some kind of boundaries to that, and considering maybe not introducing cell phones and social media to these 14, 12, 10, 5-year-old kids. And
55-year-old people.
And 55.
Yeah.
No, I am in that category. I'm 46, but but we're all dealing with some degree of addiction in the dopamine hit pseudo productivity space.
We are.
And it kills this, which is real grit, which is real progress, which is real health.
Right.
And I don't know if there's any solutions other than, like, join the Amish. I don't know. Is there?
Well, I think that there's a level of individualization, right? I've known some really talent. Like, if you were to find, whoever your favorite athlete is, whether it's the what's his name, Kansas City Chief quarterback, right, or whether it's the Michael Jordan that kind of dates me, or whether it's Michael Phelps or whoever, like most of these athletes are dating me, but I'm just saying, if you want to take your best musician, right? So, if you're a Led Zeppelin fan or whatever, right? Like, so.
And you are dating yourself left and right.
Yes, I know, right? So I'm just saying, if those people have not only worked hard, but they're also genetically gifted, right? There are a lot of people in this world whose brains are wired and they're capable of doing a lot of those things. And it doesn't really have a significant, like, the data-driven statistics prove that there's a certain number of people on the bell curve that can thrive in this world and not have it really negatively affect them in the media world, right? I've known a few gamers who are amazingly healthy and they're fit, they do their exercise, whatever, and then they game for 4 or 5 hours. And people that are professional, they build games and it doesn't destroy their life. But those are like, they're outliers in the bell curve. For most of us, it doesn't do us a lot of good. And for some of us, it kind of destroys their life. And so many times, you think about the modern era of marijuana, right? Where I know people personally who wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for marijuana, because it literally is the only drug that is consistent enough to keep people with a certain level of major depression alive, right? So am I opposed or am I not opposed to medical marijuana or to legalization? You know, but then you have like to the normal person, and then you have like all the people that it destroys their life. So how many people have died because of it? How many people, I call it the I don't care drug, right? Like how many people like lose all passion for life so they can chill out and not feel any worries or any pain, like just, you know, peace out in the world so that I don't have to worry and feel like normal, right? So I just like, it doesn't matter how many people, because I'm in this world and I'm grateful for the people who it saved their life for. And I also know that there's 1 million people on this planet that have used it and had it not affect their life in a negative way. Like, you know, like half of the baby boomers in college in this country where it didn't ruin their lives, right? They went to college, they partied a little bit, and then they're like, they move on in their life. But when you look at the real data and the statistics of what that particular drug does, particularly in the young age groups, right? 24 and below, it's scary. It's hellacious. Like there's no way I can sit here on a podcast or privately anything and say that I'm like pro marijuana legalization, right? Medical marijuana, that's different. But I'm telling you, like that can destroy people's lives. So whether it's technology or drugs or whatever it is, there's always going to be people who can thrive. And there's always going to be people who will destroy their lives. The real question is, what about the middle of the bell curve? And I just think particularly self-esteem, particularly women more than men, that like the whole social media thing is a hellacious nightmare. And I don't think it's good for 50-year-old women or 70-year-old women or 16-year-old women or 6-year-old women. Like it's hurtful to the self-esteem and it rewires their brain and they're getting those dopamine hits and the algorithms are so advanced. They're way smarter than any human. Right? Like everybody who studies it knows it.
Would you say men as well are affected in that space too?
Oh, for sure. It's just not as bad, right? And it's just
there's some susceptibility there.
Men, I mean, the way that the human brain is, between the gender differences, the way even that the eyes work differently and connect to different parts of your neurology, like women, the same way with non-social media, right? Women are proven to be more verbal, more relationship oriented, more this, that than a typical male, like middle of the bell curve, right? And in the same way, men are visually stimulated. That's why men are more likely to be addicted to the games.
Like gamers.
Mm-hmm. Right? And the women are more likely to be socially affected by the social media, right? Yeah. The negativities of the social media. Yeah. Not to say that it doesn't hurt the men. Social media can still hurt and affect the mental health of particularly young men. But, you know, I watched the decline of my own, going back to my father, of my own father's ability to think critically when he got on Facebook at age 75, 75 to 82. And it was like watching his logic just disappear. Yeah. And I don't think it had anything to do with his age, maybe a little bit, but I think it had to do with the fact that his primary input, it wasn't from church, it wasn't from work, it wasn't from social interaction with his family, it wasn't from community service, it was from an algorithm feeding him stuff and making him miserable and making his brain not function correctly. Yeah. It was crazy, right? Yeah. So it's...
And the adolescent mind, in as much as it's exponentially growing, right?
Yeah.
It's
more dangerous.
Hypersensitive to all of the woes of all of that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. It's just really, really good to bring those kinds of things up, just in the sense of like, again, passionate about progress in this life. Yeah. And the grit and the necessity of all those things that come along with that. And then if we'll call them grit killers, right? Yeah. Progression killers. How much is like when boredom is filled up 100% with dopamine hits from all these technological screens. Yeah. there's no creativity, there's no grind, there's no progress, there's none of that space.
Right.
And so that's tough. I think we're in a very challenging social, psychological time for our youth and for our adults, and we have to figure this out. I spend a fair amount of time in the mountains, really to get away from all of it.
Right.
Just because I'm as addicted as the next person. I struggle with the dopamine as much as anybody. And so can I get away and just go do a hard thing? And I forage for mushrooms, I hunt animals, I hike, I go breathe. And I was just up at 11,000 feet last weekend. I took a nap in this mountain field in the flowers, and I climbed up to there, and it just felt good.
Yeah.
Like I laid on the earth. I was just grounding to the reality of where we are in I don't know. I grew up in a rural town on dirt roads, and I felt grounded daily. And then I went to the city for UNLV, and I was like, asphalt, concrete everywhere. Where's the ground? Like, I just want to touch the dirt. And it was hard for me. I had
Too
to go
hot
home.
to touch, by the way, down there, especially this week.
Yeah. But I would come home, and I would just lay on the mountain and just feel the dirt. And I think we, in some ways, kind of got to get back to some of those spaces of just, I don't know, just in Japanese culture, they call it Shinrin-yoku, which is like forest bathing, where you go into nature and they have green zones and then blue zones, and blue have like some form of water, like a creek or a pond, and just be there and just breathe and hear and listen and ground. And I think those are really, really helpful too. How do we help our kids in this space? Like, I mean, there's gotta, do we turn it all off? Like I'm struggling right now. I've got teenagers. I'm like, guys, and I'm constantly having to, like, we don't give anybody cell phones until they're this age. And then we're like, no social media till this age. But you have to introduce it at some point, because they're going to get crazy exposure to it as they go. I've got two in college, and it's just, it is so hard, because you have very sophisticated PhD level people creating algorithms to addict these people to these devices. And
so the how, I mean, I don't know how. I think it's individual. Like anybody who comes on and says that they know exactly how, like, I just don't think they understand what it means to be uniquely human, meaning that every human is unique, right? We're all more alike than unique, but it's, I would, with all of my kids, except for my youngest, we didn't let them have cell phones until a certain age. But with my youngest, right, it was like we broke, and we justified it, and it was a false justification, right? It was a false argument. It was all about safety, and it was all about, emergency plans, and then it was, social media was against the rules in our house until you're an adult. Like, you can get social media when you're an adult. You move out, get it, fine. Well, every one of my adult children immediately filled their phones with social media, and then they're on it, right? And some of them, my oldest two, I've got a 31 and a 28-year-old, and they'll go in and out. They're both smart. They're both college educated. They both have multiple master's degrees, right? They're just like, and most of my kids, right? And so, and they're like, Dad, I'm off social media, and I just don't think it's healthy, and because they know all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, they're on every day, right? And then 6 months later, they're off, and then they're on, and it's like a struggle, like just like some people struggle with eating, right? I've been struggling with overeating my whole life. I'm a nervous eater, right? So some people struggle with whatever they struggle with.
Meth.
Yeah, I mean, right.
Literally, it's like meth.
Yeah.
I'm hearing crack addict right now. Like, this is the crack behavior, alcohol behavior.
Right.
It is the same.
And so the only thing I think we can do is educate. And education is different than shaming, right?
Totally.
And so you educate, you challenge, you educate, you challenge, you prepare, you talk about, it's not okay in our family. I'm not going to let you have social media till you're 18, till you're 16, till you're whatever your family rule is. But then you have to predict, like, this is what you're going to feel. This is what's going to happen. You're going to dive in, like all in. You're going to go right into that cold water. You're going to be down there swimming and seeing the fish, and you're not going to want to come up for air. But then eventually you'll figure it out, and you'll want to, and then you won't be able to, and then you'll struggle. And because the truth is that I don't know anybody. I know a lot of teenagers. Like, I hate to say my favorite, my most successful, the two most successful high school wrestlers that I have been training right now, far and away, the most dedicated, the hardest workers, the ones that have, the highest potential for Division I scholarships, like, both state champions, both just really dominant. Like, neither one of them have phones that work. They're not on social media. They don't have bad habits, right? They don't waste their time. And so it's almost like raising a child 20 years ago, right? Yeah. And I'm not their parents, either one of them, but they're active and they're out riding mountain bikes and they're out doing, socializing and flirting with girls and doing all the things that like I used to do when I was a teenager and my kids did when they were teenagers. But now my kids are all adults and I'm watching the teenagers and I'm like, okay, I still have 150 athletes that I'm coaching. 10 years ago, half of those kids were being sucked into social media world and the phone world, and the other half were training hard. And now it's like, okay, now we have 90 to 95% who are sucked into this world and 5% that aren't. But the difference in their performance, I just don't think it's, human brains have a tendency to see what they look for. So maybe this is confirmation bias, but it's hard for me to not see it because, like, when a college coach says, hey, who you got coming up this year? Who should I be looking at? I'm like, ding, ding, ding. And all those same athletes are the ones whose parents either aren't funding their phones, right? Or don't allow it, or the kid broke it 2 years ago and the parents wouldn't buy him a new one, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think I don't know. Maybe I like to be data driven, and this is more anecdotal. So I don't want to be like fear-based or whatever, but education and then delay.
There's data here. Yeah. And the American Association of Pediatrics, Academy of Pediatrics, mm-hmm. they speak to this space. And there was an interesting data, the same guy who wrote The Coddling of the American Man, I can't remember his name for a second, but great guy, social mm-hmm. scientist, PhD level guy. And he was talking about 2010 to 2015, really when smartphones became
normal for everybody.
Normal.
Yeah.
Now we're past flip phones, right? Flip phones were like, they're just okay. Yeah. Good for talking, sucky for texting.
You're right.
That's about all they're good for.
Yeah.
But then smartphones came to online. So now we have dopamine hits at every corner, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like nobody goes to the bathroom without their smartphone anymore.
Right.
Like it is a dopamine fest. 2010 to 2015, which is the time frame you're talking about, is really when we put one in every hand of every teenager and every adult. Right. And the mental health decline went down.
Oh, yeah.
In adolescents specifically, 50 to 150% increase in mental health issues in that time frame. And
suicide went from number 3 to number 1 on death, right? And I know the data's there. My point is it's correlative.
Yeah.
And I personally believe that it's, that it's more than correlation, that it's actually causative.
Yeah.
But, that's hard to prove, particularly when you have outliers that can thrive.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so, because everybody's got an argument that, well, that didn't happen for me, or it doesn't happen for me. And most people are in denial, and some people, they're telling the truth, right?
Well, let's just say life hack.
Yeah.
Destroy your child's cell phone. Right? I mean,
run over it on accident.
It's just like, hack. Here you go. And there you go. And don't fund it. And let's just see where that kid goes.
$1,500. There's a lot of good hot sweat labor. By the way, I had 3 teenagers working in my yard today at 101 degrees, right? And none of them had their cell phones out, but they're actually working in the middle of the day in the hot sun doing pulling weeds in a field that has no purpose other than to pull weeds for teenagers, right? Right? And so,
I love it.
So I don't know.
Craig,
I love
you have
it too.
inspired me. This has been really good for me. I need to grit down and do hard things more. I need to shut down my technology dopamine hits. I will do better. And I think that the awareness, the education piece is the key, like you said.
Yeah.
Like, bring awareness to it, consider it, look at it, keep looking at it. Just like any addiction, just like, oh man, I noticed that this is getting in the way of my relationships.
Yeah.
I'm not connecting as meaningfully, whether it's addiction to alcohol, meth, cocaine, you name it, or screens. Like they are all in the same boat of disrupting our progression and grit in this life.
Yep.
And so look at it and keep looking at it. And that's what I talk to my families about. I say, gosh, look at it.
Yeah.
Just look and see, is it productive for you? Is it productive for your children? Is it creating good habits and good things in your life? Is it not? Consider that, and then consider what to do about it. Because that's you guys. You get to make these choices. And it's stacked against us because of the addiction piece.
Yeah.
Like, oh, people get a choice, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but when you addict them to very deliberately, in a very sophisticated way, like that's rubbish. Like you're stacked against it.
And it's stacked against us too. I mean, the reason, like you said, you're admitting to your own dopamine thing. Me too, right? I live on a cell phone because I have 13 companies and I have places to be and people, and I'm on call, and I've got people in crisis that are paying me to take care of them. And so I have to be on my cell phone to be a successful part of this society. So again, like that's why education of teenagers is so important, is because even if they like believe you, they're like, Dad, thank you so much for teaching me this. And I'm the type of person who's going to be smarter than the average because I'm in the 99th percentile. So I'm not going to fall to those mistakes. Well, you're not going to fall to those mistakes until you get your first job. And the CEO says, you need to get on and make a post. It's part of your job to post these things so that our company can get their marketing. And, I'm the CEO of my companies, and I have these, I pay tens of thousands of dollars for these tech people to come in and teach me how to market my companies. And what do they all do? They all say, well, you need to do this and this and this. It's all technology based. Yeah. And so I send out the emails, please, 450, 500 employees, please do all this. But I don't do it personally because I personally, I have all of those accounts. I don't even know my passwords. I never log into them on purpose. Because my own mental health is more important than my financial success in the company. But you literally, you can't go to high school without having screen time, significant amount of screen time. You can't graduate from 4 years of high school without spending at least 1,000 hours in front of a Chromebook, right? Even if it's just the school assigned Chromebook. You can't get a job without going online and filling out an Indeed application or whatever it is. You have to know technology. You have to be able to work in the computer world. You've got to get jobs. You've got to make money. And more, the workforce will be technology based. So that's another reason. Like, yes, it's the addiction. Yes, it's this. Yes, it's the social. But it's also very real. Like, we have to be able to find a balance and learn how to combat the natural tendencies that those dopamine hits are giving us. Again, education. Like, it's happening. You feel it happening. What controls in your life, what habits in your life are going to protect you from letting it go too far. Right? Yeah. And because there are some people, like if I have a boutique herb shop and I don't have a lot of financial needs and I've got a nice clientele, then I can be in nature, I can grow plants and I can sell them to my neighbors and I can grow my own food and I can not be involved in technology and be successful. But then I'm also in the 99.9 percentile because pretty much anybody else that has a real job eventually is going to have something to do with technology.
Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you so much for this discussion. This has been really fun.
Well, John, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
In closing, I'd just like to encourage all of our clients, our families, our teams to be cognizant, to find that balance of technology, grit, progression, doing hard things. This has been a good reminder for me, and you're such a good example. It's awesome, man. Keep it up. This is cool. This has been
good.
Really fun. Thank you. Any other little tips in closing? Anything else to just...
No, I can talk forever. That's one of my weaknesses. I get passionate about something and I just want to keep talking about it. But so this is a good topic. On your list that you sent me, there were a lot more things we could talk about. If you ever run out of guests, I'll come back and we'll talk about something else.
Yeah, I want to have you back. One of the things, these Serenity wood pieces that I make, this is my little fun thing that I do. That's also, it requires concentration and time, and there's a lot of effort that goes into these. And, I spend hours on these silly things, and I give them to my patients, and they, just for a grounding source, just for a fun thing.
They're awesome.
But I love it. This topic on resilience and on grit and progression and doing hard things, I love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
So fun.